One of the most useful features of Adobe Illustrator is its ability to convert a raster image to a vector image. That comes in really handy when you have crummy artwork to start off with and you want to clean it up and use it enlarged in whatever piece that you're working on. If it's video editing or compositing in After Effects or even in Photoshop, and you just want it to be a lot cleaner and smoother looking. Sometimes we get logos from clients that are really junky, or they don't even have a decent copy of it, and you have to use what's available on the internet, and you'd like to be able to clean it up and get it as nice as possible before you use it. So to kind of show an example of that, I have a little tiny logo here. This is something I found online just to kind of provide an example of janky artwork. It's a cute little logo thingy for turtle, whatever that might be. And you zoom in and it's really pixelated. It's a low-res, low-quality image, but I think we can work with it. Normally what I would do is probably go in and clean it up before trying to digitize it, and that's another saying I'm digitizing something and saying I'm converting it to vector artwork that's the same thing. That's what it means. So we want to convert it over. We want to have the cleanest and highest resolution black and white artwork we can get before we go and try to do that. But we're going to pretend that this is the best we've got. So let's take it and get it into Illustrator and let's run the image trace tool and see what we can come up with. So there are a couple of different ways I can do that in Illustrator. I can go to Place and find it and drop it in. There it is. Another way to do that, if you already have Photoshop open, is to actually just click and drag it from Photoshop into Illustrator, and there it is. So either way works just fine. You get the same results either way. Let's take the one that we placed in here. Now we need to find the image trace tool. That's under Window, Image Trace, and it comes up as a little palette. Now we have some presets that are very handy. Inside of these presets you'll see lots of different potentials. We've got a black and white logo, which is probably what we're going to use for this as a starting point, but you can also do multiple colored images and convert those as well. You could actually take a photograph and pull it in here and run an image trace on it, and it will create lots and lots of little bitty shapes for all the different colors. So you could actually make a somewhat photographic vector art by running an image trace on a photograph. We're not wanting to do that. Typically what we use it for around here is when we're trying to work on a logo and fix something up for a client. So we're going to start with black and white logo. Now it's already showing me a preview based on the default settings here. I'm going to twirl down the advanced menu and we can see lots of different settings we could play with. Now let's see what we've got in here. We see a lot of curves where there should be hard straight lines. We see some things are just kind of off. Definitely if you look at this R in turtle, that's obviously not where we want it to be. So let's go in here and see what we can do by playing with some of these settings. The first one that you see in here before you even twirl down advanced is this threshold, and that's going to look at the black value. I'm not going to get into the specifics of what each one of these little settings do, and if you hover over it, it'll tell you what it means. Pixels darker than threshold value are converted to black. So that could be handy since we had a lot of little bitty tiny gray bits. If we switch over here and zoom in Photoshop, we can see all these little gray pixels. So that's going to get rid of that for us automatically. So we can play with these settings and see what we can come up with. Let's get kind of thickening up as I move that. I'm going to kind of keep it, and if you take it all the way down, that's what you end up with. But what I want is something about, that's looking pretty good. We want paths. I don't mind having more paths in here. That's how many paths it's actually going to create, which is the amount of math data involved in this thing. I don't mind having more paths in this. It's not that big a deal to me. That's looking pretty good. I see a few little problem areas in the R. This up here isn't exactly symmetrical in the top of that little logo. There are probably some curves where there should be corners and vice versa. You can adjust how many corners are in there. If you want more corners and straight lines than curves, you can adjust that, and that's getting somewhere. Noise is a factor. I think we kind of got rid of most of that with our threshold setting. I think this is getting about as good as it's going to get. I'm going to say OK on this. Now, when it's already in preview mode, you don't have to hit enter or anything. It's basically already done the work. The way that you approve what you're looking at is by going up to the object setting and selecting expand. It's going to take this raster image and convert it to vector image when I do that. And it gives me one more thing. There's another little setting down here that's very handy. Ignore white. The white box that this logo is sitting on, of course this is a merged flat raster image here. I don't really want to create a box and little white areas inside of here. I just want the black stuff to be vector shapes. That's all I want. So I'm going to say ignore white, and it's going to get rid of that for me when I say expand. And expand is going to create the shapes that will comprise this vector logo. So there we go. Now if I switch to outline mode or wireframe mode and look at it, you can see that's vector data right there. It's fantastic. I could go in here if I wanted to at this point and edit it, because it's pure unadulterated vectors, and I could grab any of these nodes and do whatever I wish with them. And what I would wish to do typically would be to clean things up. I would go in here and I would straighten these things out. Like you look at the T, I would want these things to all be straightened out. I would go in and convert some of these nodes. This node has some Bezier handles on it. I don't really want that. I want those to all be just corners. There's a way to do that using the Illustrator tools like the anchor point tool. I would go in here and select these things and say convert them to corner shapes, and then I'd go in and it gets pretty tedious, you can tell, right? We're not going to do all of that. I just wanted to show you what the possibilities were and kind of what the capabilities of the tool are based on the image that you have going into it. So the worse the image that you have going into it, the worse the vector data is going to be. This is not really horrible. This is totally workable. I would want to fix this shape up here. But other than that, it's getting pretty close. It's not bad. It's really not bad. There's potential if once in a while you can take an image and you can actually upscale it in Photoshop, give it more resolution, more data, and then pull it in. And sometimes you get a better trace that way. So there's lots of little ins and outs of it. Let's take what we've got here just to show and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we have a new vector image we can use in our projects. Let's take it and let's get it into After Effects and play with it. There's two ways we could do that. I could save it as an Illustrator file, turtle logo, and I can import that into After Effects. Hey, look, it's a turtle. Let's import it into After Effects. There's a turtle logo, and let's just pull it on in. There it is. I can drop it in there. Wait a second. There we go. So there it is. I can scale that up. I'm going to want to switch on this little toggle over here that is to continuously rasterize that layer. If I don't do that, what it's going to do is it's going to get pixelated. It's not going to rely on that vector data when I start scaling it up. So if I hit, you can see if I zoom in the pixelation that's occurring. But if I toggle on this little bitty kind of asterisk looking toggle down here in After Effects, suddenly I get my vector data back. So that's one way to do it. Now there's another way to do it that comes in handy for us After Effects folks, and that is to instead of importing it as an Illustrator file, I'm going to turn that off. I can go into Illustrator. I can select these vector shapes. I just did a it would be a Control A on a PC. I'm doing a Command A on a Mac, and I'm copying those shapes. I go back over into After Effects, and if I create a solid, I can paste with that solid selected. I can paste, and it will create masks for that solid using that vector data. And now I can scale that whole thing. And this is going to look a little weird at first, but as I scale that thing up, you can see that what I have is mask paths now, all based on each of those different shapes in that Illustrator file. So that's all my vector data, all as masks automatically. So very cool, very cool. That's one way to do it. And this is the other way to do it. So doing it this way and creating vector art out of that janky web image that I found. Hi, email. Doing it this way and creating vector data out of that janky raster image we started with, that right there, I've essentially created really clean artwork to use in my project, and it didn't require a lot of work. So let's, just for fun, let's import that PNG into After Effects and pop it in here. Let's pretend we were going to use it in here, and I'll do something like change the mode to darken, so we're just black is showing through, and I scale this thing up. And of course, if I scale it anymore, it's already looking pretty nasty along the edges. You can see the pixelation, and you can see the anti-aliasing is showing through. Let me zoom in and slide us over there. You can see the anti-aliasing is creating problems. It's just, that's not the way to do it. You create vector art out of it, and you keep it clean. Keep it clean and mean. So that is the image trace tool in Adobe Illustrator, and it's good stuff.